His plan was, even if he had to go broke and max out all kinds of credit cards, he was never going to not do a good project just because of materials getting in his way. He did, if he needed the markers, he bought the set. If he needed something else, he got whatever he needed. He made sure that, he worked his butt off just so he could afford to do this and do it really well. But me, in particular, once again, I know my background being, once again, when I went to school, my family had no money. I mean, my dad passed away when I was a little kid, and my mom worked just for a paycheck for years and years. So there was no money for me to go to college on. And so I had to, get by with what I had. But so in particular, once again, I've got like a 20% gray. I'd pull out maybe like a 40. That one was a 50. 70. Maybe it's that one. Colors on the back don't tell you much. 60. What's that one? 80. Look at the little dot. Jeez. Can't go by what you see. There's a 40% gray.
So you need 20%, 40%.
Yeah. And then maybe 80. I'll try and do this with 80. I mean with 3 markers only. There's a 60.
20,
80
40,
again.
and 80.
Yeah. But that, just take this for a grain of salt. Okay. You were asking a good question, but think in terms of, well, let's see. Well, anyway, that's one half. Let me move on to the marker. If I had a water vessel, I would clean this off so it doesn't go bad on me. I'd also put, see, this is all my inking stuff in here, and I know this is for ink. I have a lot of paintbrushes. Where'd the top go? Because I don't want to take a bath. I've got a lot of paintbrushes, and I would never try to use that ink brush again for something else in my arsenal of brushes. So I keep it in here so I know it was for ink purposes. The other one I can tell already was the one I used for white because you can just it never really cleans out. But brushes, these brushes downstairs, I'm not a toter of the company, but the little brushes that these are down in the school store, very good. I use them all the time and they're pretty cheap. I mean, the one thing back to materials, I don't cheap out on our paintbrushes because it's how I get my paint from the palette to the canvas. And it's my life, how I make a living, somewhat, And so it's important to me to use decent brushes, and these little cheapy brushes work pretty well. Because I just beat them to death. I'll use them for, basically I'll use them on one painting, and it's almost worthless after that. But I will, abuse them royally during that time, and then for a couple of bucks, I'll get another one. Markers. Okay. If I'm adding some tone or shadow to this particular drawing, there is a drawback to this little gizmo, and I'll show it to you. This thing is quite nice and gives me pretty fine lines. Not as fine as those lines, but it's not waterproof. And so sometimes if you're rubbing this and you're perspiring or something like that, and I've done that before, I touch it here and then I move my finger over there, and sometimes it leaves me a gift, and that's not my plan of attack. I'm trying to impress the people that I'm doing my storyboards for. And so normally with a marker, I'm going to just try to add some tone to something, and you can kind of see the 20% is very, very light. And this one's starting to go. This one's starting to go. And works better without the lamp. I try to use markers with the light on. You working away, and you can't see a thing. It's just not showing up. And then after you're done, you turn the light off and you go, what the hell happened? And so if I'm adding some shadow or tone, I'm going to just, I try to use sort of like almost a minimalist approach. And by the way, the markers, 90% of them come 2 tips. A little fine line tip and the big one. And almost never use the fine line one because once again I could be doing that same thing, and you can see, first of all, it doesn't have much life left in it. But the fine one, once again, just like the fine markers or little rapidograph pens, I could draw for a while and I'll find myself spending 3 hours on one of these things, getting nothing that you can see done. or you can see it, but you know. And so for the most part, working on the larger size is a better idea.
Make it look so easy.
Oh, it is easy. Of course, back here is going to have some tone to it. And as I said, I normally like to work on a lighter side of the tone first. And getting over the edges a little bit, we can, you know, we're artists. We'll get away with all of that. Let's go with the 40. So you can see that a little bit better. There is occasionally, if I wanted a larger area to go dark, black. I'm sort of letting the paper give me some texture, which can help to silhouette him. Probably then going to want to go with a little tone in there. Because it's also a good idea to have some real light-dark value contrast changes in a specific storyboard panel. And you know what? It's okay so far without going much further. Because sometimes a little less is more kind of thing. Without me, you know, and I've only done half the panel. There's another character over there, but I know there's only so much time in the given class for you guys to, you know, because I also still have to look at your work and give you whatever insight individually. The panel, by the way, working on this kind of black panel as we see, is kind of nice because you notice what I'm doing. I see this all the time. People, we're going to try and make the marker and we'll go up to the edge and stop. And back to what I even described before, you get these hinge marks, you get lapping lines and things like that. And oftentimes stopping too close to the edge, you get all kinds of gifts that you don't exactly, they don't look as clean or clear or professional as they could. But working in the big black oval frame here, I can drag a line and just drop it out. And run it right into that black and no one will ever see it. So there's a little reason for my madness of making that big black bold line around the page. If you have, by the way, something, if you go at home, you don't have these panels made ahead of time. This is done with like our laser printer we have in the building. But if you use your ink printer, per se, at home, your inkjet printers that I have, and I try to do the same thing. Sometimes the black border then will bleed into your colors or something. You're doing that. So that the medium is a little bit different. Secondarily, too, it'd be almost a good idea if you had time. You know, markers are a new medium for some of us. Okay. If I had the time, I would have inked this whole thing. You know, this is one of those things that you'll only think about it afterwards. I'll ink this whole thing. I'll get it all done. When it's ink, it's gonna, you know, it scans well. You can see it really well because it's ink. Ink shows up good in scans and Xeroxes things. If you then Xerox your page, then you have another copy of just the ink work. Okay, and if you mess up with your markers, I'm sure that would never happen to anyone here. Then you'd have a second one you could work on again. You could figure something out with the first one and actually have a second one. That's if you can plan it ahead of time and you have the time to stop by